we're no longer invisible. More people really do understand that trans people exist, that we are part of the fabric of society. So that's definitely progress. But we are now experiencing the backlash to that progress.
Hello and happy Pride.
Hey, happy Pride.
My name is Henry Giardina with Q Digital, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing activist Rodrigo Heng-Lehtinen. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I guess let's jump right in. So obviously you've spent a lot of time advocating for trans rights. You've been on the front lines. Looking back, what are some of the highlights and some of the things you're most proud of from your time as executive director at the National Center for Transgender Equality?
Well, I was really fortunate to be the executive director of NCTE and then the continue on as executive director of a new organization, Advocates for Trans Equality, which I just recently left in order to do even more trans activism in a different capacity. But orchestrating that merger and co-creating a brand new organization was such an honor. And what it's really about was building power of the trans movement. I mean, I came out in 2007, which in a way wasn't that long ago, but in another way was kind of like a whole other era when it comes to being trans. And at that point, we as trans people were still fighting to even be recognized and treated as an equal part of the LGBT movement. And it just became really clear that we needed to build our own power to be able to have as much of a seat at the table and be able to be part of the decision making about how trans campaigns would even work. So I'm really proud of having co-created that organization to build our power and have that power in numbers. And then the other thing, if I can cheat and give a second, is
Of course.
yeah, thank you for indulging me. I'm so proud to have been part of getting the US Trans Survey off the ground. The USTS is, at this point, one of the only sources of data about trans people's experiences. The federal government is gutting research left and right. The federal government has been revoking people's grants and threatening academic institutions. And so now there's very little research being supported and done about trans people's experiences or really any marginalized population. But the USTS is part of the solution to that problem. With the US Trans Survey, we trans people can take matters into our own hands. Instead of just being upset that research isn't being done, we can do it ourselves with the power and this expertise of professional academic researchers and people who are really trained in this field. It is the largest and most comprehensive study of trans people's experiences. We broke the record of the most trans people filling it out and really getting vulnerable and sharing the reality of their daily lives. So I'm really proud of that. And the health volume of that is coming out in just a couple weeks, coming out this June for Pride Month. So stay
Wow,
tuned
that's
for that.
awesome. Yeah, that's exciting because, yeah, obviously our opponents have used the lack of research and the misinformation to create just so much crap. So that's super important and super exciting. And sort of speaking to the fact that, you were saying in 2007, it was like such a different world in terms of trans visibility and representation. So much of public understanding has shifted in some ways for better and in some ways for worse. What do you think has changed the most in the public conversation around trans folks and trans rights, and what still needs the most urgent attention?
Well, I think in 2007, years prior, where trans people mostly were invisibility. Most of the American public didn't really understand who we were. If they did have any idea at all, it was a lie. It was misinformation and really hurtful stereotypes that would show up on places like the Jerry Springer show. And that's all people usually knew about us. So we were really dealing with invisibility, or for the few people who had some idea, it was really outright lies. What's different now is that all these years later, we as a movement have been really successful at introducing ourselves to our neighbors. So we're no longer invisible. More people really do understand that trans people exist, that we are part of the fabric of society. They know there's trans women and trans men and non-binary people. So that's definitely progress. But we are now experiencing the backlash to that progress. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that this dynamic of progress and backlash happens throughout American history. This is part of how social justice movements play out in the United States, for better and worse. This is a familiar cycle. The reason I think it's important to know that is to keep up hope. We are in a backlash right now. We trans people are under attack. There is no doubt about it. And we can still fight back, because being under attack does not mean that's the end of the story. It's just one chapter of the story. We can still get through it and come out to the other side.
Yes, absolutely. You grew up in a very politically active family, and I'm wondering sort of, obviously that has shaped your own activism, but I'd like to hear from you sort of how you feel your upbringing like helped you sort of like create this path for yourself, and also how you've like diverged and followed your own calling within it.
Yeah, I have the very weird distinction of being the first openly trans child of a member of Congress. And to put another little weird twist of fate on top of it, my member of Congress mother was a Republican. Not exactly the party that's associated with support of trans people, or frankly any marginalized community these days, unfortunately. I grew up in a family that was super political, not just my mom being in Congress, but also a history of activism over generations. My grandfather was an activist in Cuba, which is where my mom's side of the family is from. So I was raised to talk about politics all the time. You know, I am an activist because they taught me to care about the world around me. Now, we have very different opinions. We do not agree on quite a lot of things, but they taught me to be engaged. They taught me that you have to be an active part of society, and that whatever's going on with the government, if you disagree, you can fight back. You can always do something about it. So I'm really, really grateful for what they taught me. And then when I came out as trans, when my mom was a sitting Republican member of Congress representing a Republican district in Florida, we were both really scared of if the voters were going to reject her. And I personally was terrified that she would reject me, that my whole family would reject me. You know, I think every trans person relates to that, sadly. I was really lucky that my parents did come around. My family was shocked at first. It took them a while to understand, but they did say, "You're still family." And I'm forever grateful for that. And now, fast forward to 2025, my mom is out there as a fierce and protective mama bear. She may still be Republican, but she is willing to fight anyone who has anti-trans views. And I think that offers some hope for us.
Yes, that's the allyship we need. Absolutely. What are some things that you found that can sort of help you like sort of rest and recharge and like get back to the battle, but also take that downtime for yourself?
Well, advocacy work is really grueling, frankly, these days. So you're absolutely, I appreciate the question so much. I would say what gives me a lot of inspiration to stick with it is history. I draw a lot of encouragement from learning from people who've been in this fight longer than me, and even people from who've already passed away who did this in decades earlier, when it was a really different fight, and in some ways even harder and less resourced than it is today. I think it's really encouraging to remember that we have been through this before. Trans people have always locked arms together and supported each other even when the government failed us. Like, just because the government turns your back on you does not mean it's all over. And our history as trans people proves that. It's not just some, naivety. It's history. It's proven. So I draw a lot of encouragement and inspiration and even lessons in how to organize from people who've done this generations before us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's extremely important. And I'm wondering too, just, I mean, it's hard to, even though, as you said, like trans people are good at creating community, but, sometimes if you're just, talking amongst friends or whatever, it's hard to sort of help each other out, knowing that we're all feeling rough, knowing that we're all going through it. Like, do you have words for, folks who are just really struggling and maybe have a hard time sort of keeping that history in mind or keeping that hopeful spirit?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's perfectly understandable to need to take a break sometimes. So I would say just because you're trans does not mean that you're obligated to do trans activism all day, every day. I would say that's the case for anyone who's part of a marginalized community. It might sound weird for me to say that because I am an activist and I'm always trying to recruit people to get involved. But we're human too. We got to take care of ourselves. So, first and foremost, I would say uh, you should give yourself permission to unplug sometimes and do something that doesn't have anything to do with being trans, but is just something you love anyway. Maybe it's gardening, maybe it's cooking, maybe it's listening to music or making music. It's okay to take a break and do something that's not activism or even watching the news, following social media sometimes. And then when you are recharged and you want to get involved, I would recommend getting involved in your local community because all activism is important, but I think there's something that feels really good emotionally about doing it in person, face to face, with your neighbors, with people in your community. And I guarantee you, no matter where you live, there's some kind of queer or trans group near you. If you don't know where to go, I would recommend checking out Equality Federation and Centerlink. Equality Federation has a directory of advocacy groups all over the country. And Centerlink has a directory of LGBT community centers all over the country. So if you don't know where to start, check out those two groups and get involved in your local community.
So you're moving on to a new chapter, and I'm interested in what are some things you're excited to do in this new role?
Yes, I have moved on from Advocates for Trans Equality, and now I am an independent operator at the moment, doing activism on my own. And what I'm really excited to do is change hearts and minds. I believe that what's underneath this tsunami of political attacks against trans people these days is that the public doesn't yet fully understand who we are. There are certainly right wing extremists who are going to attack people no matter what. But there's also quite a large group in the public who simply doesn't understand us, who it doesn't know anything about us except what the right wing extremists are putting out there as disinformation. So I think that if we are able to really talk to a lot of these people in the public who haven't yet made up their mind yet, we can recruit them over to our side. We can grow that public support, and that will make it a lot harder for the right wing extremists to come after us. Right now, these extremists are coming after us because they think it's easy, because they think, hey, the public doesn't know anything about those people, so let's scapegoat them. But if we build support, if we trans people introduce ourselves to all of our neighbors around the country and really show that we're part of the fabric of society, we're just trying to go to work like anybody else, then it's going to be a lot harder for the extremists to attack us. It's going to be a lot less popular. So that's what I'm focusing on is I'm focusing on public opinion and changing those hearts and minds to increase trans acceptance.
That's awesome. I mean, I feel like it reminds me of like the Harvey Milk thing where he's like, everyone has to know a gay person. It's like, yeah, everyone has to know a trans person. It's just like a normal, these are people in your life.
Exactly. I mean, I think that philosophy is really why we won on marriage equality.
Yeah.
So this is actually another, quick lesson to draw from history, not to get too nerdy here, but I on now we can take marriage equality for granted. We think, of course, anyone can marry anyone, and it's no big deal. But it was a very big deal just 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And
Yep.
at that time, we were losing on marriage equality in state after state after state, in public referendum, meaning everyday people in the public casting their ballots, and in state legislatures. And in the courts, even, we were losing, losing, losing. Fast forward to today, we've won, and we think it's the most obvious and simple thing in the world. So what changed? What changed was everyday Americans getting to know a real gay person in their life so
Mm.
that they wouldn't fall for the lies and misinformation that the opposition was spewing. And what changed was that our campaigns started talking about values instead of talking about
Mm.
legal technicalities like inheritance rights or something. We talked about love and commitment and what it meant to love your partner and want to spend your life with them.
Mm.
Those are values based things, and that's something everybody can relate to no matter who they are or where they live. So I think there's a lot of potential for us to win that way by talking about us trans people in terms of values, not all this political nerdy stuff, but
Mm.
the stuff that's about emotions and feelings and what you relate to in your gut.
Absolutely. Like less like bathroom talk and more just like showing people who we are and like our humanity. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I have this dream of doing a campaign that is like trans people and their pets. You know what I mean? Like you've got dogs,
Yeah,
right? What if we did some portrait series of trans people and their dogs? Super
totally.
relatable. And that's real.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering too, what does, obviously this is, it's a rough year, it continues to be a rough year, but what does pride mean to you today? And sort of how has the sense of celebration changed through the years?
Pride means hope to me. Pride means being committed to building a better future no matter what. That we get to thrive and have joy and have a good time no matter who's in the White House, no matter what the government's doing, no matter what people in power think about us. We still got us. You do not need the government's permission to be trans no matter what. And we can still live our lives on our own terms. Of course, it's still harder if the government is after us. But we still get to be us. And pride to me is an opportunity to tap back into that, to kind of refill our well of hope and inspiration and community. And remember that we can still be us and we can still be vibrant and we can still lock arms no matter what.
Can you share a favorite Pride memory from past years or from recently, just something that stands out?
Well, this is pretty personal, but I actually met my husband at Pride. So that is my favorite memory. It was 13 years ago. I can't believe we've been together 13 years already. But it was the first Pride he ever went to, and I was tabling. I was working at this very small grassroots organization called Gender Justice LA that was by and for trans people of color, and I was tabling, and it was a long and grueling day, and then he came up to the table, and what a delight. And now we're still together 13 years later, and it was the one and only Pride he's ever been to, so we joke he has a perfect record.
Oh my God. That being the only Pride, that's amazing.
Right,
Wow.
handled.
Incredible.
But that's the
Awesome.
power of community, right?
Yes, seriously, you can meet your soulmate. Amazing.
100%.
Well, thanks so much for joining me today, and congrats on being a Pride 50 honoree, and I hope you have a lovely Pride month that is full of joy and community and pets and excitement, all that good
Thank you
stuff.
so much. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so honored by this, truly, and really appreciate you all including me.
And keep up the incredible work.
You too.